Hi everyone, I'm Kim, I'm an alcoholic. And I'm nervous. Sean asked me to speak. I'm here visiting from Boston, so when someone asks you to speak, you do it, right? I could have given him 100 excuses, but I didn't, and now I wish I did. So I grew up in Massachusetts, about 45 minutes north of Boston, and single mom, one brother. My mom worked a lot. She partied a lot. She was a young mom, and my brother and I didn't have a whole lot of supervision. So, when we became of age to, kind of do our own thing, we did our own thing. God, I'm so nervous. So I went, I was good in school. I was smart. I went to school every day. I never skipped school until I was in high school. I did well. I look back and I think, why did I, not want to miss school? And God, I'm so nervous. Breathe. Thank you. So I didn't want to miss school because I was afraid. I was always afraid I was going to miss out on something, like where the party was going to be, if somebody's, got drugs or booze or whatever. I was just afraid I was going to miss out on something. So I never missed school. I started drinking when I was about 12 or 13, and I didn't wake up one day thinking today was a good day to drink. I did it because everyone else around me was drinking. And, before I picked up a drink, I remember feeling, like I didn't fit in anywhere. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't pretty enough. I didn't fit in anywhere. I didn't even feel like I fit in my family. So when I picked up a drink, all of those feelings went away. It was just, let's do this. And at 12 or 13, I didn't have the money to buy booze all the time. I didn't have the means to get it, so I didn't drink all the time. But from the very first drink, the obsession was on. It was just like, I thought about it every single day. Does anyone know CPR in case I have a heart attack? All of those feelings went away, and I wanted to drink as much as possible. And, I was a blackout drinker from jump. And every single solitary time that I drank, I blacked out. Most of my, early teens into my 20s, I don't recall because I was pretty much in a blackout. I went to a vocational high school. So I went into high school and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought I was going to be a painter. And at the end of my sophomore year, my guidance counselor said, Kim, I have a spot in cosmetology for you if you want it. And I said, yes. And I'm grateful for that. I'm still a hairdresser today. I own a hair salon. I don't know what I'd be doing with all the drug abuse and alcoholism that I had along the way. I don't know what I would do if I didn't have, my career. So I graduated high school, and my mom asked me to get a job so that I could help her out a little bit, and I wanted to. And I would go out every day to look for a job and get sidetracked somehow. It was, somebody has this, somebody has that. And one day she said, if you don't get a job, I'm going to move, and I'm going to move into a smaller place with your brother. And I'm like, I'm going to get a job, Mom, I promise. And I had every intention on doing that when I went out the door. And I had gone out on a bender, and I'm not sure, I don't recall how long I was gone, but when I came home, she was moved. She moved. And I was just like... and it set me up for the poor me and why me and how could you do this to me, and it was all about me all the time. And my alcoholism and drug addiction just like took off. I had a baby when I was 18. Not long after he was born, I became a single mom, and at that point I was already an alcoholic. And alcohol and drugs called the shots. And I did the best that I could for as long as I could. and my family stepped in and took him, and I'm grateful for that. I wasn't at the time. At the time, I was pretty pissed off. Sorry, there's kids here. I was pretty upset. But you know, hindsight being 2020, I'm grateful. He didn't have to get put into the system, and he stayed with family, and and I didn't get sober. At that point, I wound up homeless. My drug addiction took off. I lived on the streets. This city in Massachusetts, Lowell, and it was not a very nice place to be, you know, and no person should live the way that I was living, let alone, you know, a 5'2", 100-pound woman or girl. But that's what happened, you know, and I wound up homeless, and what happened for me, and at the time I wasn't happy about it, but I started to get arrested, you know, just for things like trespassing in a crack house. And you know, I'm just like, how can you arrest me? You know, like, and I would cry, you know, and I thought, you know, if I cried hard enough that they would let me go, and that never happened. But I'm grateful for that, because, you know, I believed every single time I got arrested was the day before I was going to die, because I lived like an animal, and I didn't eat, and it was just, you know, I was robbing, I was jumping in cars, I was stealing. Oh, it was. When I think about it, I'm like, how did I survive that? God had another plan for me, obviously. You know, I got sober. The first time I got sober, I was 25, and it was like, go to Framingham Prison or go into a halfway house, and I had to think about it. But I didn't want to. I had gone to Framingham a couple of times because I couldn't get bail, so Framingham, it's prison, whatever. And it was very, very scary, but I went there 3 times, so it wasn't, you know, nothing can scare an alcoholic. But finally, the judge gave me that ultimatum, and I took the halfway house. So I got introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I stayed sober for a couple of years. The house was a life skills house, so they didn't really do a whole lot of talking about the steps in that at that time. And I wasn't going to volunteer to do them, of course. So I stayed sober a couple of years, and, you know, my son came back into my life, and I moved away from my program, and I relapsed. You know, I stopped going to meetings I moved away from where I got sober to, because I thought, because I had my son, I had to be near my mom, which, I don't know why I thought that. But within a month of the move, you know, I'd stopped going to meetings, and I relapsed, and, you know, I wound up homeless again. My son was gone again, and I got sober again for a brief period of time. I didn't go to meetings. I decided to go back to school for something. I'm not really sure why, but 1998, I went back to the place that I had built a network, and this time I got into the steps. In Massachusetts, where I'm from, back then, it was, you did an AWOL, and it was basically doing the steps in a group setting, and it was all women, and I got really connected to women, because when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was a tomboy, so I hung out with boys growing up, and there weren't that many women or girls or anyone when I was out on the street, so when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was intimidated by women. I didn't really trust them. I didn't think I would get along with them. And so this AWOL that I did it every single year for 9 years. But I'm an undisciplined alcoholic, so doing it in a group setting, no one's checking my work. You know what I mean? So, you know, they'd have a table set up with all these different ways to do the 4th step, and of course I'd look and be like, this is the easiest one. So I'd grab that and do it halfway. You know what I mean? I'd do a little bit of work. I never did a 5th step. The first couple of years I didn't do a 5th step. I did a 5th step the first time with this woman who at the time, I didn't know she was much sicker than I was, but I was reading her my fifth step, and she started yelling at me and calling me like a bad mother, and I was just like, what? I'm like, all right, if this is what this is, I'm good. I'm all set. And I was just like, what the hell? So I continued to do an AWOL, and I continued to, I participated, but I didn't do the work. I never really did any of the work. And I met a guy. I think I was about 5 years sober, and he was like fresh out of a halfway house. Tells you where my head was. But, we stayed together, and we were both really sick and resentful, and like I would get mad when he left the toothpaste off the cover off the toothpaste, and if he left his sneakers, I'd get pissed, and I'm sure he got mad at me. So anyway, we stayed together, and he was about 4.5 years sober. I was about 9 years sober, and he relapsed. And he was a hardcore drug addict, and like I wasn't. He just did it differently than I did it, so I thought he was hardcore. But he scared me. It scared me. And I was just like, what is happening right now? Like, I was with this guy for 4 years, and he relapsed, and he came down here. And I had, been doing these AWOLs, and I was just, every single year that I was sober, I was getting sicker and sicker, and I didn't know it because I'm going to meetings. I had a hair salon, and I had all the stuff, like everything on the outside looked I was doing pretty good, but on the inside I was just like baffled by how my life, how I felt on the inside. And this guy that I've been dating, who I thought would stay sober forever, right, picks up, and he came down here, and I was, on the phone with him. I would talk to him, and the first night he got here, he's like, I went to this meeting, it was outside, and, there was 2 people sitting up on this picnic table, and they opened the big book, and they started breaking the big book down. I'm like, yeah? I'm like, all right, well, you still got to go to meetings. So I was like, I was angry, and I was untreated, and I didn't know. I didn't really know anything about the big book at that point, because we did these AWOLs. We did them all different ways with different books. So I didn't know really that the steps were laid out, the process was laid out in this book. But he started to change. The way he was talking changed. The way, I came down to visit him, and he looked different. Like, he looked alive. And I was like, okay, so there's something to this thing. And I ended out at a big book step study meeting. And I walked into this meeting, and this girl was speaking. And I knew her from AA, and I did not like this girl. I was like, really? I come to this meeting, and she's speaking? I was just like, what? She became my sponsor. When I did my 5th step with her, I found, we laughed about it because I was on her 4th step, she was on my 4th step, and, for the same reasons, you know what I mean? She's a stuck-up snot, and, whatever, all those trivial reasons why we don't like women, right? Or guys, too, I'm sure. So, I went through the process. I got up to, so I did my 5th step, and, she had a lot going on in her life, so the direction she had given me was, take an hour with God, and I took the hour drive home. When I was driving in my car, I literally felt like I was floating. It was the most incredible experience I had ever been through, but I didn't, and then she had me start writing my 8th step. So, all right, I did it. I thought I was doing the right thing, and she ended up moving to California, and I refused to get another sponsor. So I just that was it for me. And that guy got sober, we got married, life was good, but I never looked at myself. I never looked at my character defects. I never changed the important things that needed to be changed. I never did, and I was 15 years sober, and, I got married, and every year of our marriage, he was either going to treatment or coming back. He was either coming down here or coming from here. And we were in our 4th year of marriage, and he came back, and it's actually 11 years ago tonight was the last time I saw him. He left. I kicked him out on Friday night, and I had done that before because he got high again. And I'm like, I'm not living like this, and I asked him to leave. I'm like, go get help, do what you gotta do, but I can't do this anymore. And I never saw him again. He overdosed and died. this weekend, 11 years ago. So when he died, I was an untreated alcoholic that was sober for 15 years. And he left me with a lot of money. I had a business. I had Alcoholics Anonymous. I was connected in Alcoholics Anonymous, but like I said, I never did that work on myself. I never changed the person that I brought into Alcoholics Anonymous. And one of the character defects that I didn't change that almost killed me was my codependency. Like my need to take care of someone. Like I had to. Like I had all these girls that I was sponsoring and, telling them what to do, and I wasn't doing anything that I was having them do. I was giving them all kinds of advice, and, I was not taking it. But, so I'm now an untreated alcoholic. I'm a widow, and my whole life turned upside down, and I was lost. I was very, very lost. And along came another sick alcoholic, right into my life and scooped me right up. But I was sick, and I wanted to feel good, and I knew at that point drugs and alcohol weren't the answer. You know what I mean? The thought of that never crossed my mind. This guy was a drug to me, and he was not very nice to me. And over a 2-year period, I went from this, having my stuff together on the outside to I was 12 years old again. In 2 years' time, I was 12 years old again. And this guy, I had to take care of him. He ended up using about a year into the relationship, and I allowed him to do it in front of me in my house because I didn't want him to die too. So I allowed all this sick behavior, and I was 12 years old. I was so insecure. I felt such crap about myself. I couldn't stand myself. Still not a thought of a drink, right? And I don't know, one day I chased him around Boston because I didn't want him to die. He didn't want anything to do with me at that point because I was so crazy and insane. But I was still insisted on chasing him around Boston so that he wouldn't die. And I finally managed to get him into the car and I took him to do whatever he needed to do. And I went home, and we're driving in his car, and it was just this junk box car, and we're driving through East Boston, and he throws a bag of stuff in the ashtray, and I grabbed it and stuck it in my pocket because I'm driving. If we get pulled over and there's a bag sitting in the ashtray. Got home, and he was just not nice to me. And one second I was sober for 17 years, and next second I wasn't. And up until that point, I had never done opiates, and I relapsed with opiates, and my whole entire life went in a spiral very, very, very quickly. I lost everything that I had, everything. Within 6 months, I drove down here because I thought, let's go to Florida. That's where my husband went, you know what I mean? But I was with him. So we're driving down here, and I got hooked up down over in Boca with one of my late husband's friends, and I stayed down here for a while. Anyway, he got high while we were down here. I went back to Boston. I bounced in and out for another 6 or 7 months. And, that day came that, I'm homeless. I had nothing. I had no one. People in Alcoholics Anonymous, it just, what happens when people disappear. You keep track of them for a little while, and then they just kind of disappear. And that was my story. And I was all alone. I was sitting in this apartment that was nasty. I was all by myself, and I had drugs, and I was all alone, and I couldn't take the pain of that loneliness. I was so alone, and I had family and friends that cared about me a lot, and I reached out to my uncle, my late husband's uncle. I'm still very close to his family. I'm actually visiting my brother-in-law here. I ended up going to the hospital, and I told them if they didn't, and I had bounced in and out of detoxes, but I would go in and I would leave, and I would go in and I would leave. And this time I went to the hospital and I said, if you don't put me somewhere, I'm going to kill myself. And they put me somewhere where I found out later I could have walked out if I wanted to, but I didn't know that at the time. And whatever, I didn't want to leave. I went there, and the very first thing that I did when I got into that detox is I got on my knees and I started to pray. I said the 3rd and the 7th step prayer every single day. And I went in from detox, I went into this other halfway house, sober house. I don't know what you want to call it. They call it halfway houses, but I think they're just sober houses. But I had to do the steps. So, I started doing the process. They did it at this house, and the guy came back to Boston, and I wasn't going to call him. I wasn't going to get in touch with him. And on April 7th, which is the day that my husband died, I could not get in touch with him. Like, I kept calling, and there was no answer, no answer, no answer. And the following day, he said I overdosed last night, and they had to, chest rub me, and they hit me with all this Narcan, and of course I have to leave this program so I can go save this guy, right? So I was with him for 24 hours. I left that program. I went to the drugstore. I got Narcan, and I babysat this guy for 24 hours. The next day, I was just like, what am I doing? I am going to die if I don't stop this right now. And I just happened to be in my mother's parking lot in a car that was about to get repossessed. I went up into my mother's apartment, and she was not happy with me because she knew she had just dropped off food and everything for me in this halfway house, and she was mad, but she let me stay. And I was sitting in, so my mother lives in, it's like a high rise, and it's senior living, so she lives in this, little tiny studio apartment, and, I slept on an air mattress in her living room for 7 months. I'm so grateful for that. I was sitting in the hallway, and there was this other girl that was living with her mother in this place too. And this woman walked in the hall. This woman I knew from Alcoholics Anonymous. She walked in, and she looked at me, and I started talking to her, and she's sober 40-something years now, so she was 30-something back then, and she, we were talking, and I told her, I said, yeah, I just left a program, I started the work, and, the girl that works at this house is doing the step work with me, over the phone. She's like, no, you need FaceTime with your sponsor. She's like, here's my number, I'm available if you want sponsorship. And I thought about it, because I had it going on, right? So I took her phone number, and she lived in the same building that I was living in at the time, and I was very early in recovery, and I started to meet with her every day. I went up to her apartment, she sat down, she read the book to me, we kind of started back from scratch, and, she went through all of the steps with me. And, the 4th step, a lot of people talk about the 4th step being so scary and so hard, and I mean, I get that it is, but it's not shocking. It's not something we're shocked about. It's we did this. Look at it and let's move on, right? So for me, it was 6 and 7 that changed my life. We did this book called Drop the Rock. I don't know, I'm sure there's people that have heard about it. We went through that book, and we did a lot of work on 6 and 7, and I got to look at these character defects that needed to be, the ones that were glaring that needed to be changed, that were causing me to be sick and stay sick. And, and we went through that book, and I did 6 and 7, and, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 10, 11, 12, it's important for me to, I can't go, when I'm not a nice person, or if I snap at somebody, or if I'm mean, or because I'm an alcoholic, I'm human, I'm not perfect. I can't go very long. I can't go a whole day being mean to someone and not apologizing to them. You know what I mean? So, I'm very fortunate, and I don't hang on to stuff either. I found that holding on to resentment is foolish. It's just wasted energy, and for me, so I went through this process with this woman, and I stayed living on my mother's living room floor on this twin-size air mattress, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I had closed my business after my husband died. I had a business for about 8 years, and I closed it. I made a decision to close it. I was like, when my husband died, I was just like, I couldn't even think straight. So, and I wasn't really working while I was using. I did for a little while until I couldn't, and so now I don't have a job. I don't have a business. The clients that I had, it had been a while, so I was gonna paint, because I took painting and decorating while I was in high school, so I thought I was gonna paint. So I went to the union and I did all the work, and I'm gonna be a painter. And I had a friend that owned a painting company, and he hired me, and he was another alcoholic who I would cry every day because he was mean to me. I was wicked sensitive, wicked emotional. And I fell off a ladder. I think I was 9 months sober, and I was painting for a friend. I was painting her bedroom, and I'm on this ladder, and it's only like a 3-foot ladder, and I'm going up and down, and I'm painting, and I come down the ladder, and the ladder tipped over, like on the side, and I went flying up in the air, and I landed on the ladder, and it was old school solid wood ladder, so it was like heavy and hard as a rock. And when I landed on this ladder, I broke my ribs, and I did something to my hip too. But I was alone in the house. My friend Annie's sister was downstairs, and she only had one leg, so she couldn't come upstairs, and she had German Shepherds, I know. I could hear her, and my friend Annie had a German Shepherd, and he was going berserk. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't open my mouth, so she called an ambulance, and the ambulance came in. I look up, and there's like ambulance, firemen, cops, and and this EMT is like feeling around my ribs, and it was like all like jello, and so they get me on the stretcher, and they bring me into the ambulance, and I hear him say something about fentanyl, and I lost my mind. I'm like, you can't give me that. I'm sober 9 months, and blah, blah, blah. And he said, all right, we don't have to. We can give you something else, but if you need surgery, you won't be able to get it. So it's either this or that. And I'm like, and I just prayed. I said, God help me, and whatever. And I went to the hospital. Rushed in, like, I've only seen this in the like movies where they, rush you into trauma, and they cut all your clothes off, and they like zoom you in. Well, that was me on the stretcher, and I was just like, and I was out there at this point. I was like, hey, everybody, and they're cutting my clothes off, and but I prayed in that ambulance, and I stayed sober. I didn't relapse. I didn't like take it to the next level, because I could have. I stayed in the hospital for a couple of days. It was thank God for the hospitals, and thank God for pain medication. That's all I can say, because I was in agony and I couldn't breathe, and the pain was excruciating. I would gladly give birth to like 17 more kids compared to the pain of the broken ribs. It was awful. But I stayed sober, and I made a decision at that point that I wasn't going to paint anymore. Like, I'm not painting anymore. That's clearly not what I'm supposed to be doing. So I got a job at this little hair salon, and I kind of was on Facebook throwing it out there to people. Here I am. I'm back. I'm back. And my clients kept reaching out, and and I worked my way. My sobriety date is March 25th, 2017, and the gifts. I didn't sponsor anyone for 4 years because I was terrified because of my codependency. I was really, really afraid. I was afraid that if I helped someone, that I was going to lose myself again, and I wasn't going to take care of myself. And so I did a lot. I just worked on myself, and I helped, you know what I mean? But I didn't take anyone through the steps. I took people to meetings. I wasn't sponsoring, and I started another business. And one of the girls that works for me, I worked with her at a place a while back, and we started working together. And her daughter needed help, and she called me. She's like, Kim, she's like, Jamie needs help. And I don't know what to do. And I'm like, I got this. So, I didn't search for a sponsee. I wasn't looking, but I guess I was ready, you know what I mean? Because God plopped this girl right on my lap, and, I couldn't have had an easier sponsee to work with. Like, she just did the work, she followed direction, and it was the most amazing thing to see, to watch, and to experience. It was the first time all the years that I had been sober prior to this, and you should see my big book, like the first 64 pages are falling out and nothing after that. It's all nice and neat. The first girl that I took through that actually went through the whole entire process. So it was really amazing to watch her, grow in Alcoholics Anonymous and take on sponsees. And, I love my life today. I would not change one thing. There's nothing I would change. The only thing that I would change, if I could, would be the time that I missed with my son. That's the only thing that I would change, nothing else. Because every single time that I relapsed, every time that I got sober, there was a learning experience there for me. You know what I mean? I had to learn, and most alcoholics have to learn the hard way, and we don't take the easy route. So I had a lot of really amazing learning experiences, and my late husband's family, I'm still very, very close to them. His brother moved down here about 5 years ago, down to Valrico. So I come a couple times a year to visit him, and his dad, I'm really close to his dad and his uncle, and they're like my family, and I'm so grateful for that. And if I didn't have Alcoholics Anonymous, if I didn't have the ability to look at myself and get honest with myself and change the person, I don't know that I'd still have that relationship in my life today. And it's so important, that relationship. I have nephews and nieces, a niece and two nephews, and one of my nephews, he's my godson. So he's always like, we're tied, we're family forever, So yeah, I opened a hair salon right after COVID opened up. I'm risky. I take risks. But because I was sober, because I was doing the right thing, an opportunity presented itself. I had a friend that, offered to help me, and, we put it together, and it's a lot of work, and it's hard work, and it's rewarding. I get to employ people. I get to be the boss. I love being the boss. I get to take vacation whenever I want, It's just given, the business that I had prior to this, I wasn't in my right mind, emotionally, spiritually, like I just wasn't there, and I had to close it. And if I'm honest with myself, I had to, because I wasn't doing the work that I was supposed to do on my sobriety. So I was just crazy and nuts, and I was going through menopause, so there was all kinds of stuff going on there. It was pretty awful. So, but this time around, it's very different, because I can take a step back. I can look at myself. I can talk to people. I'm not, snapping if, somebody doesn't do what I want them to do. I don't feel the need for people to do what I want them to do anymore. And that was my thing. It was like, my whole entire family did what I told them to do. And if they didn't, they had the wrath of me. And I didn't know any of this. Like, I have my brother and I are best friends today. And when am I speaking over? No. Is it time? Am I good? Okay. 5 minutes? Okay. Thank you. So I'll wrap it up with this. Like, my brother and I are really, really good friends. We're 15 months apart. We grew up together. We got into trouble together. And although when he got in trouble, it was my fault. So we won't go there. But we're best friends. And when I was on my way down here back after my relapse, a while back, I called him by accident, and he never answers the phone for unknown calls or whatever. And he answered the phone, and I was looking for money. I had, it doesn't matter what, but anyway, he said, "Kim," and I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Pete," and I'm like, "Oh no." But that man talked to me every single solitary day for months and months and months while I was down here, when I went back there, and I forgot where I was going with that whole thing about my brother, but we're just really close. I have an unbelievable relationship with him, and my mom, she can sleep tonight. You know what I mean? She knows that I'm safe. My son, this is how I know it doesn't matter what happens in your life, that you can stay sober, or you don't have to get so wrapped up in it. I had an argument with my son's wife about 4 years ago, and I was pretty much pushed out of their family, and I haven't really, I have 2 granddaughters that I haven't seen in almost 4 years, and my son won't talk to me. And, my son and his wife were both heroin addicts, and, they got sober, and then they decided they were going to drink and be normal to keep up with the Joneses and all of that, and that's fine. Like, I never really, it's not my business, but I got into an argument with her one night, and I said some really bad things, and I haven't seen my son, but I pray every day, and I there's nothing I can do. I can't change it, like I could go there and stop banging on the door. I want to see you. I want to see my granddaughters, but what good is that going to do? It's just going to push them further away from me, and but I pray for him every day, and just like I pray for the sick and suffering alcoholic, I pray for my son, because I really believe like he's sick and his wife is sick, really sick. And for a long time, and I prayed for bad things to happen to her for a long time, but I know that's poison. That's poison to me. It's poison, and I did. I wished that she would get run over by a truck, and I would have these dreams that I would see her in an alley, and I would just smash her face off the wall. Yeah, but that's not good for me. It's not good for me, and I can't think that way. So I have to, even though I don't care for her all that much, I have to pray for her, and that's what I try to do. And hopefully one day my son will call me and say, I want to see you again. And if not, that's his life. I believe he's going to call me.